This is a regular mage player that only copies random builds in-game. And this is a mage player that is using an optimized build. Both players are using the same hero, but one of them is doing way more damage than the other. That's because this player has taken the effort to optimize their build to maximize his output. But how do we make an optimized build for any mage in the game? Well, I've created a really easy 4-step process that you can use to create a custom optimized build for your favorite mage, and I'll show you how to use it. So let's get started right away with the very first step, and that's to select the mage that you want to play. Each mage has their own optimal playstyle which defines their function. So I have categorized them into 2 main playstyles depending on which is more optimal for them. The first category is burst mages, and they're characterized by their higher cooldown combos, making them more suitable to focus on high damage output. So we'll be looking for key stats like magic power and penetration when crafting their builds to maximize their damage output. The second category we have are poke mages, and they're the opposite of burst mages, with a focus on low cooldown skills spamming to apply consistent damage and effects on enemies. Instead of just pure stats, they're looking more for item effects for additional application through their skill spam. While I've split these mages into 2 highly specific categories, many of these mages are versatile enough to use a build from the other category. So just keep that in mind as we go to the next step. Alright, now that we've decided on a mage, let's move on to the second step, which is to start building their core build. I've specially designed 4 core build paths for each type of mage, and each of these paths are viable based on the strategy you decide upon. Neither of these paths are going to be better than the other, and they are each optimized to be powerful depending on the strategy you've decided. The first is the penetration build, and it's best used for early game snowballing, or if the enemy lineup contains mostly squishies to burst down. The build achieves this by overloading on fixed penetration stats to overwhelm the squishy enemy's low magic defenses. The Assassin Emblem, Rupture Talon, Arcane Boots, and Genius Wand all grant high fixed magic penetration, making the build extremely effective in bursting down squishy targets. We then further boost our damage with high magic power from Blood Wings and Holy Crystal, while Lightning Truncheon adds to our burst damage with its synergistic passive for burst mages. The last item slot is a flexible item slot, and this can be filled with any useful magic item, which we'll be covering in the later steps. This build is highly effective on mages that already have penetration effects within their kit, like Eudora and Nana, but can still work very well on most mages without those effects in build. The second build is meant to be a more versatile burst build, and is designed to be suitable for a range of situations and enemy types, whether they are squishy or tanky. The Mage Emblem is used since the stats offered here are highly suitable for mages in general, and Divine Glaive offers excellent percentage penetration, so it's good regardless if the enemy has built high magic defenses or not. You can generally build this on most burst mages, regardless of the enemy lineup, and it'll still do great. The third build is focused on lowering cooldowns, and is fantastic if you like to have lower downtime on your combos. The Mage Emblem, Magic Boots, Enchanted Talisman, and Lightning Truncheon helps us reach the maximum of 45% cooldown reduction, allowing our mages to get their skills back as quickly as they can. In addition, if you're facing mana problems on your mage, this build ensures that your mana is constantly topped up by building Enchanted Talisman, so you hardly ever run out of mana. Mages that can use this build really well include Vexana and Luo Yi. Our final build for burst mages is the Mana Sustain build, and it's an alternative to the build above if your mage is mana hungry. The Common Emblem and Inspire Talent grants mana regen stats, helping to keep our mana topped up right from the beginning of the match. This allows us to be aggressive early on, as we don't have to wait for Enchanted Talisman to be built to start skill spamming. The main drawback is that we lose the higher damage amplifying stats from Mage or Assassin Emblem, but this is okay since we can replace Enchanted Talisman for a better damage item. Mages that may find this build viable are mana-hungry heroes like Veil and Odette. Now moving on to the poke mages, we'll be starting with the damage build, which as the name states is focused solely on maximizing our poke damage output. Penetration remains a strong stat to boost damage, so the Rupture Talon and Arcane Boots are built to maximize damage output. Glowing Wand is a staple on poke mages due to their ability to consistently apply the burn effect for extra poke damage. Wishing Lantern is also highly efficient with a poking playstyle, since the earlier it triggers, the more damage the passive can deal to healthier enemies. Blood Wings and Holy Crystal are again used for their high magic power to boost the base damage of skills, while Divine Glaive is extremely effective against all damage types. Any of the poke mages will find this build effective if your strategy is to focus purely on damage. The next build focuses on gaining the maximum CDR of 45% through the Mage Emblem, Magic Boots, Enchanted Talisman, and Wishing Lantern. This allows for constant skill spam for damage and application of the chosen mage's control effects from their skills, and is therefore a balance between supporting the team while also outputting decent poke damage. And since we have Enchanted Talisman, the build also solves any mana issues we may have, making it great on mana-hungry mages. Our third build is the Utility build, and this is similar to the build above. with the exception that we also include Ice Queen 1 as a core item. Ice Queen 1 slows enemies whenever they are hit with our skills, so it is built to add even more control effects. This adjusts the build to focus even more on supporting the team with control effects rather than improving damage. Our final build is once again an alternative build for mana-hungry heroes who want to apply more early game pressure by avoiding the need to build Enchanted Talisman or Demon Boots. The Common Emblem and Inspire Talent are again used to help with mana sustain right from the first second of a match, and the rest of the item slots are filled with suitable items for poke mages. And that's all the core builds that I have designed, forming the baseline for any mage that you want to build. As mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that mages in the burst category should not use builds from the poke category or vice versa. For example, if you want a versatile mage like Xavier to be more centered on burst to improve on his out damage, you can still pick up the full CDR burst build to optimize for that. Anyways, we only have 2 more steps to go to completely optimize our build. So let's move on to the third step right away, which is to customize the build further with needs that we were not able to cover with just the general core builds. The first example of this are Cecilion and Jusin, who love mana stats in their builds thanks to their mana scaling. With more mana, Cecilion can deal more damage, while Jusin is able to cast her second skill longer. This makes extra mana optimal for them, so Clock of Destiny, Lightning Truncheon, and Wishing Lantern are desirable items for them. However, Clock of Destiny is the most ideal as it makes them more tanky, and also provides timely mana recovery from its passives, so we should include it whenever there's a flex slot in the core builds, or replace an item in the build if needed. For example, suppose I selected the Versatile Burst build for Cecilion. I can directly place Clock of Destiny in the flex slot to include Clock of Destiny. However, if I went with the damage poke build for Jushin, there would be no flex slots available. Therefore, I would have to replace the least essential item in the build, which is Holy Crystal for Jushin's case. What's least essential for one mage may be different from another, so it really is quite hero specific and is subject to interpretation. If you are unsure of what item to replace in the builds, feel free to ask me in the comments and I'll do my best to make sure everyone gets an answer. You can also join my Discord server where we have a community of Mobile Legends fans that can also help you with builds or any other questions you may have. You can find the link to the server in the description or pinned comments of this video. The next mage who is extra special is Cyclops. Due to his second skill having a really high spell vamp ratio, gaining more spell vamp allows him to sustain a lot more. This makes the Festival of Blood talent and Concentrated Energy really good for him. Just for comparison, most mages have skills that only have 50% spell vamp ratio, and Cyclops' second skill is far higher at 125%. This is why we should prioritize Festival of Blood and Concentrated Energy when crafting his build. You should also notice that I didn't list the second and core talents in the core builds, and that's because they are rather situational or hero specific. For the second talent, there are 2 main choices for most mages, and it's usually going to be Bargain Hunter or Weapons Master. The typical choice and my recommendation if you're new to building is just to go for Bargain Hunter. The reason is because it's designed to help us get our items quicker by making them cheaper, and most matches rarely reach late game, so becoming stronger earlier increases your chances of winning. Bargain Hunter is also pretty nice when your build contains expensive items, especially Holy Crystal, which is the most costly magic item in the game. Weapons Master is the opposite of Bargain Hunter, as it boosts our magic power by a percentage, so it starts off weak but gets better the longer the match drags on. And since most matches end early, it's not easy to maximize the effect of this talent. One thing to note is that Weapons Master is a great pairing with Holy Crystal, as the item grants a huge amount of magic power, so you should ideally have Holy Crystal in the build when you want to equip Weapons Master. Next are the core talents, and the 2 most optimal options for most mages are going to be Lethal Ignition and Impure Rage. Lethal Ignition has more specific conditions to trigger, so only certain mages are able to trigger it consistently, making it a niche option. So what I'll do here is to list out the optimal mages to use Lethal Ignition, since any mage can trigger Impure Rage easily. The mages listed here will consistently trigger Lethal Ignition with their combos, and will also find it a solid option to improve on their single target burst damage. Now onto our final section. This mage is unique in that her build is very different from the other mages, as she's played more like a marksman using a mage build. Kimmy's kit revolves around her basic attacks rather than her skills, so she requires a unique build. I'll save us the long explanation since this isn't a dedicated Kimmy guide, but here's my recommended build for her at the time of recording, and you're free to customize it as you wish. And this completes our customization step. Take note that I've only covered what most mages will need, as this video is meant to mostly be a general overview and guideline for mage building. There may be certain quirks of specific mages that require their builds to be customized even further, but it'll make the video 6 hours long if I go through every single mage. I'm also planning to make specific guides for each mage to explain their kit and recommended builds, so make sure to subscribe and like the video so you won't miss those. For now though, you can leave a comment on the video if you have any specific questions about the mage you want to build. So far, all these steps can be prepared even before starting a match. But our fourth and final step to complete our build optimization happens after a match begins, and it's building counter items to react to in-game situations. This is what propels a good build into a truly optimized build, as the efficiency of the build is maximized according to the situation it's in. I'll be listing out 5 items here that are mainly used to specifically counter the enemy strategy, and you can slot these items into your builds when they're needed. The first and most common mage item used for countering is Glowing Wand. This item is almost a staple item at this point because of how common healing, shielding, lifesteal, and spell vamp are used when playing in higher rank matches. Glowing Wand is highly effective when the enemy lineup contains heroes with effective sustain mechanics. For example, if the enemy lineup has a troublesome healer, like Estis or Florin, or maybe a sustain fighter like Ruby or Uranus, you can build Glowing Wand to very effectively counter their sustain effects. On the other hand, if the enemy doesn't have any, or very poor sustain effects, you can actually choose to forgo this item for other options if you want. The second item we have is to counter tanky, high HP enemies like Bellaric and Hylos. Wishing Lantern's effect deals high percentage damage based on the enemy's current HP whenever it triggers. This means that it deals more damage when the enemy's HP is high, and when they are healthy. So if you're having trouble against a tanky lineup, Wishing Lantern is a good pickup to counter their high HP pools. The third item is an incredibly niche item that I usually don't like to build as it's so situational. But it's also highly effective when the enemy consists of high HP enemies, since the effect is also based on HP. Skypiercer can immediately execute any enemy if they're damaged by you, once they're below a certain amount of HP, so it's most effective against tanks that usually have high HP. However, I find Skypiercer is mostly effective on a select number of poke mages that deal small but frequent damage, since they can optimize for the trigger point of Skypiercer. On the flip side, burst mages tend to overextend the damage way past the trigger point, and would probably have killed the enemy with or without Skypiercer, making it extremely inefficient and redundant. Examples of mages that I personally think are most efficient with Skypiercer include Jusin, God, and Chang'e. Moving on to our fourth counter item, Divine Glaive is specially built for countering high magic defenses. You'll see that I've already included this item in almost all of the core builds, and that's because it's just such a powerful item. And dare I say, the most powerful item in the entire game. Even though I list it as a counter item here, since Divine Glaive is supposed to be designed just to counter high magic defenses, the penetration stats it provides are so overtuned that it'll still be highly effective against low magic defenses. In any case, if it's not already in your build, you must build Divine Glaive if you're having trouble against an enemy with Radiant Armor or Athena's Shield, as it drastically improves your damage against them. For our last counter item, Winter Crown is built mostly for its defensive utility, as we can freeze for 2 seconds when it's activated. During this period, we're completely invulnerable and cannot be targeted, damaged, or CC'd. This is especially effective against enemy divers like Yin or Hanzo, and can really mess up their game plan. However, Winter Crown has pretty poor stats for a completed item of its cost, so try to only build it if you really need it. Now that we've finally gone through all the steps, I want to show you exactly how you can use the 4 steps to build the mage you want, using 2 direct examples. So starting with step 1, let's suppose we want to build the newest mage in Mobile Legends, Zetian. I've categorized her as a poke mage. So moving on to step 2, we can first take a look at the poke build paths. I've decided that I want to build her with the full CDR poke build, since I really want to spam her skills and have a good balance of poking and damage. This allows us to move to step 3, and start customizing the core build. Using the advice in this section, I went with Bargain Hunter and the Impure Rage talents for her. Now we can move on to step 4, which is to craft the counter for her match situation. So let's say we start a match and we end up with these heroes on the enemy lineup. Looking at this, Alpha, Estis, and Uranus are going to have high sustain, so Glowing Wand is a high priority item to counter their sustain. Luckily for us, our build already has Glowing Wand, so that's not an issue. Uranus will likely build a full tank build, so we can keep Wishing Lantern in the build, as well as Divine Glaive. For our final flex slot, we can opt for Winter Crown if we find the enemy keeps targeting and diving us, or we can opt for any of these damage options to further improve our damage. This is actually a build that I used for Zetian in a real ranked match I've played recently, and you can watch it in action in a video that I've linked in the pinned comment. So check it out if you want to see if the build works. Now let's start again with another mage, going back to step 1. This time, let's go with a versatile mage like Chang'e. Moving on to step 2, let's experiment with something more different since she's more flexible. I want to try snowballing early and dominate the enemies right from the early game. So let's try the penetration build from the burst section. With this, we can start on step 3 for customization. We'll be taking Bargain Hunter since it's better for snowballing and suits our build well. Impure Rage is selected here since Chang'e is not suitable with Lethal Ignition. This concludes step 3 and we can move to step 4. Here's the enemy lineup we matched with. Since Ruby has high sustain, we want to ensure that Glowing Wand is a feature in the build to counter her. So let's just swap out Lightning Truncheon for it. Jawhead is the roamer for the enemy team, so he'll most likely be building tank items along with Ruby. But since we already have plenty of penetration with the build, we can delay Divine Glaive until we notice that they have built high magic defenses. And if you're wondering if this actually worked, you can find out by going to the gameplay link in the pinned comment, where I actually used this exact build against the exact enemy team that I listed down. Alright guys, I hope this 4-step process can help you get started on building a suitable build for your favorite mage. If you're still unsure how to do it, or if you want specific advice for your chosen mage, feel free to ask in the comments. Also, I'll be posting the entire flowchart that you saw in the video on my website and Discord server. Links to both will be available once again in the description and pinned comment of the video, so check them out if you want. I really hope you enjoyed this guide and learned something from it. With that, I'll see you guys again in the next one.